we all want to save lives. I fear, as was just being discussed, that these laws will lead to more deaths, not fewer. There hasn't been a serious cost-benefit discussion of the types of laws that are being put here. People use guns defensively to stop violent crime about 5 times more frequently each year than they're used to commit crime. And the research indicates very strongly, I believe, that it's the most vulnerable people in our society who benefit the most from having guns for protection. There's 2 groups of people who benefit the most. The people who are most likely victims of violent crime, and that's overwhelmingly poor blacks who live in high-crime urban areas. It'd be great if the police were there all the time to protect people, and the police are extremely important, but the police understand themselves that they virtually always arrive on the crime scene after the crimes occurred. The second group of people who benefit the most from having guns are people who are relatively weaker physically, women and the elderly. You're almost always talking about a male criminal doing the attack, and there's large strength differences that exist there. Before I get to specific laws, I'll just mention one thing, and that is, if guns are bad, as we've heard a couple witnesses call for essentially banning guns, murders and suicide rates should fall after, well, the professor, for one, was one who did that. And if they on net were bad, okay, then you should imagine that murder rates and suicide rates should fall when either all guns or all handguns are banned. You cannot find one place in the world where either all guns or all handguns have been banned and murder rates have fallen. They've gone up every single time, and suicide rates have not changed statistically significantly. So let me talk specifically about the laws that are being proposed, bills that are being proposed. Red flag laws. We heard mentioned earlier today that the rate of lethality with regard to guns being used in suicides, rather than lumping all other methods together, which was done in the statistics that were there, you need to disentangle them. There are many other ways that are just as lethal in committing suicides as guns are. Hanging, cyanide, walking in front of a train or a bus, jumping from a height. All those have essentially the same fatality rates as going and using a gun. The problem with red flag laws is the only solution that they offer is to go and take away a person's guns. If you really believe somebody's a danger to themselves or others, you have much more flexibility. People were asking, the Attorney General was indicating that somehow you'd have more flexibility with red flag laws. Red flag laws have much less flexibility than you have with involuntary commitments. Every state in the country has involuntary commitment laws. Judges have a wide range of options. If the person, once they've gone through the mental health care evaluation, if the mental health care experts believe that there's a problem, there's an immediate hearing. If a person can't pay for a lawyer, one is provided for them, unlike the red flag laws that are here. The judge can do anything from saying, okay, you voluntarily agree to go and get outpatient treatment. After a week or 2 weeks, we will reevaluate the situation. The person's guns, the person's driver's license can be taken away from the individual. And in the most extreme case, there's involuntary commitment. It's much broader than what you have been talking about with regard to this. And the notion is, if somebody's suicidal, do you really think just taking away their guns is the only solution that you're going to have there? It just doesn't seem serious to me.
Okay, so let's continue with the testimony. Thank you.
Okay. You take something like safe storage laws. There's also this issue, and I should mention with regard to red flag laws, there's evidence, and the senator earlier, when she gave her statement, that you actually have increases in suicide. The problems with the statistical evidence that was cited before is that you just don't want to look at whether there's a change up or down, because changes occur for many reasons over time. You want to see, did the changes in those states that adopted those laws, how did their suicide rates change relative to other states that didn't change their laws? And in fact, you find that it goes up relatively when that happens. The problem that you have is that people become afraid to go and talk to others about their depression. And simply talking to other people, if you have a police officers are depressed at relatively high rates. You take away a police officer's guns, they lose their job. What do you think it does to a police officer's willingness to go and confide to others that they're depressed? They're less likely to go and do it because they're worried that their job's going to be taken away from them if something like a red flag law is used against them. With regard to safe storage laws, you look at the data. For accidental gun deaths involving people under 18, over the last 5 years that we have data, there was a total of 8 in Michigan that was occurring. You compare it to motor vehicle deaths, 135, drownings, 108, pedestrian deaths, 70. These are all in Michigan. Deaths from poisoning, 60, and bicycle deaths are more than twice the rate that's there. Here's the problem that you have. When you look at the peer-reviewed research that's been done on this, what you find is that there's no change in accidental gun deaths or suicides for young people. What's not talked about here is the impact this has on crime rates. What you find is that when you require that people have to lock up their guns, criminals become more emboldened to attack people in their homes, and they're more successful in committing the crimes. I'll just give you one international comparison. We have data across all sorts of countries. You compare the United States with the UK. The UK has twice the burglary rate that we have here in the United States. And 60% of the time when people break into somebody's home in the UK, the residents are in the home. In the United States, it's 13%. Why the difference? We have surveys of burglars in these countries and other countries. American burglars spend twice as long casing a home before they break in compared to their British counterparts. Why? They want to make sure nobody's there because they're worried about getting shot. In the UK, they don't care whether they break in when somebody's in the home because they don't have the same fear that something would happen that's there. Just one example of many. And I'll just mention licensing quickly here. And that is, you have a woman, let's say on a Friday or night, calls you up and says that her ex is threatening her. She wants to know if she can borrow your gun. You know that she's trained. You know that she is not a criminal, has no criminal record. Under this law, it would be a felony for you to go and lend her your gun. It would be, she's unable to go and buy a gun until she's able to go and get a license. In some jurisdictions in Michigan, it can be maybe the next Tuesday before it's even possible for her to go and get the license there. She may not have the luxury of time of waiting that long a period to be able to go and defend herself that's there. Unlike all the other states that have universal licensing laws, this one that's proposed doesn't even have an imminent danger exception in there. Okay? Every other state, and even that's extremely limited because anybody who's a lawyer here, and I assume most of you are lawyers, imminent danger means the person has to be right in front of her, threatening her at that time for you to go and be able to lend her your gun. As soon as the guy leaves, she'd have to give it back. But unlike any other state that has universal background checks, you guys don't even have an imminent danger exception in the law that's being proposed here. And so, the basic reasoning for why you have licensing and registration is supposedly it helps you solve crimes, okay? In theory, if a gun is left at a crime scene and it's registered to the person that committed the crime, then you can go and use it to solve the crime. You can go through sworn testimony in state after state that has place that has this, whether it's Washington, D.C., or Chicago, or Pennsylvania, or Hawaii, and what you find, or New York, or Maryland, and what you find is that you simply can't find any crimes that have been solved as a result of legislation, of registration and licensing. And there's a simple reason for that, and that is one, crime guns are very rarely left at the scene. And the few times that crime guns are left at the scene, they're never, it's because the criminal's either been wounded or killed, and so you've already caught them. And the couple times that they are left there where the criminal isn't right there, they're not registered. And the once or twice when they're not registered to the person who committed the crime. And so you're spending resources, you're creating these delays in people being able to go and defend themselves, and there's no benefit in terms of reducing crime. I could go on, but I'm sure I've gone
Thank you
on long.
for your testimony. We appreciate that.
I don't know if there's any questions.
Okay, one question from Senator Runestad, and then we're going to move on.
Just a comment. Thank you for coming in. I've been in office for 8 years. I've chaired committees. I've never tolerated abuse of anyone in my committees. I never would. I'm seeing a change here going on in Lansing. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.